Chronicles, Volume 1 by Bob Dylan. Book review. Kind of. Actually, advance warning on this. I do not have anything intelligent to say. So you could probably shut off the video right now and not lose anything. Just want to give full disclosure right at the beginning of the video. So this is part of my scripted book reviews, which is an idea I got about a month ago to go through all the years I've been reviewing books on the blog and kind of make them into videos. Some of them, especially the early ones, are not very good reviews. In fact, at the beginning I was just kind of jotting down kind of thoughts, not typical reviews. And it will get better as we continue, because I'll be moving into kind of the stage that I started in 2006, where I started kind of making book reviews a project. But yeah, at this stage I was just kind of writing down kind of brief one-sentence observations, which would get kind of put into a long rambling post, which was about 10 different things at once. If I had any sense at all, I probably wouldn't even make this video, but I've got a completist personality. It kind of bugs me to leave something out. So because I did jot down a few thoughts way back in 2005 about Chronicles by Bob Dylan, I thought I'd make the video about it. So my impression of this book is this was a huge deal back when it first came out in 2004, was kind of being talked about everywhere, and then people just kind of completely forgot about it. That's my impression. Now granted, I've been living in Asia for a long time now, so you know, maybe my impression is a bit skewed. I don't know. Are people still talking about this book? You know, I get the impression it's been completely forgotten about. And maybe that's the fate of most books, but it was a big deal at the time when it came out. It was kind of Bob Dylan's autobiography, sort of, although it wasn't real. It didn't read like a typical autobiography. And it was called Volume 1, and I remember that there was supposed to be a Volume 2, although I was looking this up on Wikipedia right now, and Wikipedia said originally it was part of a 3-volume planned set. I only remember kind of, my memory is that there were supposed to be 2 volumes. Anyways, I didn't even realize it until just now when I was looking at Wikipedia, but the other volumes never came out. I just kind of assumed like Volume 2 had come out years ago and I just never bothered to read it. But apparently, like, it might get written someday, but there are no plans at the moment. I don't know why they called the first one Volume 1, but you know, it was, at the time it was released, everyone was expecting that a second volume would come out. It was not a typical autobiography. It was just kind of 3 different snapshots of Bob Dylan's life. And I got it out of, I was living in Japan at the time, but the prefectural library was quite good. They had a number of English books, and they had a number of new English books. And this was on their new release section, so I was able to check it out from the library and read it. I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember being surprised at how good it was. Because, you know, it's always a surprise when somebody who's not a writer by trade can write a really good book. You're like, oh wow, like, I knew Bob Dylan could sing, I knew he could write lyrics, but I had no idea he could write a book. Now, the surprising thing to me about the book was how much detail it was written in, and that's kind of what I wrote on my blog at the time. I said, one thing that really struck me about Bob Dylan's book is how clearly he seems to remember certain events from his past. What the room looked like, the way a conversation went, etc. I'm tempted to compare this with my own memory. Something I've been noticing lately, especially when I'm back in the United States and meeting up with old friends, is how much I've forgotten from my college days. Now, I did kind of make an effort at the time to keep a journal and kind of save my correspondence and old emails and stuff like that, which I'm glad I've done because my memory is such crap. And then I just kind of go on for a while longer here talking about how crap my memory is. And then kind of bring it back to Bob Dylan's book and said, curious how other people feel like their memories are working. How many people believe Bob Dylan actually remembers the events with the vividness he described them? Or how much is he embellishing? And I just kind of left the question there. In retrospect, now that I've had a few years to think about this, I haven't thought about this every day, but I have kind of occasionally thought back to this book over the years. I've come to the conclusion that I was incredibly naive just to ask the question. Like, of course he's embellishing. And I think most intelligent readers probably figured that out a long time ago, that this is kind of not a strict autobiography. This is kind of part of the art form, and that he's kind of taking certain liberties and using artistic license to kind of write up elements from his past as if they were like from a novel or something like that. Interestingly enough, another reason this book has been on my mind recently is because I've been reading Woody Guthrie, Bound for Glory, which is Woody Guthrie's autobiography. Now, of course, if you know anything about Bob Dylan or Woody Guthrie, you know that Woody Guthrie was like a huge inspiration for Bob Dylan. In fact, I don't even know why I'm saying that. That's like the first thing every Bob Dylan fan learns. Yeah, you don't need me to tell you that. But anyways, it's interesting here because this book, it's not quite the same as Chronicles. Chronicles just kind of has kind of 3 chapters in Dylan's life. But this book also embellishes events in Woody Guthrie's past with kind of a detail he couldn't possibly have remembered. And kind of, he writes his autobiography almost as if he's writing a novel, kind of in recounting conversations, which I'm assuming are largely invented, and kind of details about settings that he couldn't possibly have remembered, I suspect. So I was thinking, I wonder, I mean, everybody knows that Bob Dylan's music was influenced by Woody Guthrie. Probably his autobiography was influenced by Woody Guthrie, huh? Well, I don't know, maybe. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch to imagine that because Bob Dylan's copied so much else from Woody Guthrie over the years that maybe he intentionally wanted to ape the style Woody Guthrie had in his autobiography. Like I said, it's not an exact match though, because Dylan's autobiography only features 3 kind of events, 3 kind of periods in his life that he describes in great detail and kind of leaves the rest of it completely untold. Which is, you know, if you're looking for, it's good at what it does, at kind of creating a literary picture of what it must have been to, what it must have felt like to be Bob Dylan at those points. But if you're looking to kind of get more information on his life, like, you know, what happened in what order and how did he go from like being nobody to being like the most popular musician of the 60s and one of the most popular musicians of the 60s and all that kind of stuff, you don't get that from the book. Although, as long as I've got the video on and I'm rambling and we're already at this point, I'll bring in Joan Baez's autobiography. Which my parents were big Joan Baez fans, are big Joan Baez fans, so they had her autobiography kind of on their shelves, and around 18 or 19 or something, I picked it up and made a go at reading it, and it's a much more traditional autobiography, kind of telling her life in chronological order and how she went from kind of singing in clubs to kind of gradually getting bigger and stuff like that. And you probably already don't need me to tell you this, but Joan Baez dated Bob Dylan. So there's sections in the Joan Baez's autobiography describing her relationship with Bob Dylan and describing what Bob Dylan was like. One of the sections I remember is I think Dylan had a song, and there was some newspaper article or something that was offering an interpretation of it. And then Dylan asked Joan Baez, "What do you think that my song means?" And Joan Baez kind of gives her guess at what the interpretation is. And then Dylan kind of gets really kind of quiet and moody and says, "You know, after I'm dead, they're going to interpret the shit out of everything I read. They're just going to interpret every single comma and period I wrote." Yeah, just kind of almost angry and bitter about it. I think that's really actually the only thing I remember about Dylan from having read some of that autobiography. I actually didn't finish Joan Baez's autobiography. I didn't have the patience for it. She described kind of some stuff in a little bit too much detail. I think when I remember, she was describing kind of all the high school boyfriends she had and the relationship with each of them. Around that point, I just started reading it chronologically and just started skipping around to the more interesting parts, like when she was describing Bob Dylan. Okay, I'm sure I've wasted everyone's time enough here, so I'll just shut this off here. The Woody Guthrie autobiography, I'm still working my way through. I'm a slow reader, but at some point hopefully I'll finish that and then I'll give a review of that separately.